Salutations, everyone. Welcome back to Stellaris Guides. So there was the new update, the 3.6 Orion update, which changed Ascension perks and other stuff. So I figured it'd be a good time to revisit and update guides on that. So we're going to cover the various traditions and Ascension perks as well. I'll try and rank them in what I consider a tier system, and then we'll go over the advanced specific Ascension paths, as well as the variance between which civilizations, if you're a hive mind versus a machine mind, what can you take? We'll cover all of that. And I should chapter things below, so you should be able to jump to what you're looking for. And if you enjoy this, please do like, subscribe, leave a comment, and all that good stuff. So, first off, let's talk about normal organic empires. We'll talk about machine and hive mind stuff later. And obviously, within each category, there are variances depending on origins and ethics and stuff. But we're not going to cover all that. We'll just go with your base default normal organic pop empire. It's going to say human, but almost none of the species in this are human. So the first ones, and this would be the top tier ones, the ones you almost want to get with any civilization race that you create. You want to get the expansion tree here. If you're going to expand early on, this is extraordinarily key for your empire. It allows you to develop your colonies faster. When you just start it, it adds reduced costs of snagging starbase early on. This is a huge growth. This is a huge boost to your growth and grabbing lands, because usually the biggest thing that stops you from being able to expand quickly early on is running out of influence. Unless you're playing as like a high democracy and have other ways of generating influence, you're going to very quickly run out of it. And this just solves part of the pain, gets you another 1 of every 10, basically. Down here, we've got the empire size from planets and systems. Empire size, planets and systems, there's not usually your biggest stuff that causes empire size problems. That's usually due to population. This does help a bit, though. I honestly think the whole area needs to be rebalanced, the empire stuff, but whatever. Reduce starbase upkeep. These are good ones. And then over here, colonies start with additional population. That's huge. It doubles your starting pop on these things. They become more productive. You can upgrade their capital building that much sooner. And then down here, pop growth speed. So what you would want to pick in this is obviously adopt it at the beginning. Then if you're found any habitable worlds, you want to go down the right side here, the pop and the growth speed. Growth speed in general applies to your whole empire, not just your colonies, which is great. But if you haven't found any yet, the starbase influence cost is good. Depending on your start, you should have 2 habitable systems. If you're paying an origin that does not have habitable worlds, like you're life-seeded or something, this is not the tree to start for you. But for everyone else, usually you're going to want to get the pop, followed by the growth, followed by the starbase, and then you can honestly pick whichever one you like. Usually I do courier network, the empire size from planets and systems last, mainly because I usually am not having trouble with it, and it's such a minor boost, but you need it to finish off the expansion tree, which gets you another district on non-artificial planets, as well as an Ascension perk. That is usually the best one to pick if you've got habitable worlds. Another one that is key, top tier, is discovery. And the real reason here is the completion 10% research speed. Tech is king in Stellaris, as it is with almost all Paradox grand strategy games, so this makes a world of difference. So the first thing it does, allow you to research anomalies faster, is great. You'll speed through them. It allows you to, if you find them, allows you to get your like relic chain done faster, investigate those high precursor anomalies. Then you've got 2 separate trees. Which one do you want to go down? Well, it depends a little bit. I tend to do the left one here, the survey speed, as well as the disengage chance. Keeps my ships alive, allows me to explore the galaxy faster. The big one here on the left is research subsidies is great. If you can get it, you want to. But as well as the research output for starbases and research stations, early on, most of your tech is going to come from your star bases unless you're heavily focusing on tech. So that initial boost will last you longer, which is why it's definitely one of the Ascension trees you want to get early on, because later game you're going to get more from your various research labs and stuff. On the right here, research alternatives, science level cap. The alternatives are nice. The reality is most people just put it on auto research at some point. The scientist level cap is great, especially if you're going for a race or a build that has longer leader lifespan. So if you've got like enduring or long-lived type traits, this will do a lot more from you. If you have, short-lived pop, probably not as useful. Further down here, experience gain and leader cap. Be aware this does apply to all your leaders, so including your rulers, which makes this decent even on machine empires and hive minds. Be aware there is a cap on leader cap, and you can easily go over it. So if you're planning a leader cap build, be aware that this will give you one that you want. But the gain is great, allows your scientists to level up, and stacks nice with the bonus above it. Every level a scientist goes up, they research faster and better. So it's a huge boost to your tech. And finally down here, all your researchers are cheaper. This is great, especially when you get to the higher levels and you want tons and tons of researchers in your empire when you're getting like 3 or 4K research per category. The discount saves you tons of money. And then finally, as I said, you'll have the bonus research speed. If you have access to federations through the Federation DLC, you'll have access to Research Cooperative, as well as an Ascension perk. The big benefit there is the research speed. Anything that gives research speed bonuses is great, and the fact that this tree is all about tech, and tech is king, is amazing. And this next one in the top tier, it's the last one up here, and it's somewhat controversial. Some people will disagree, but I take it every game, and I'm never disappointed. It is the Supremacy tree. The Supremacy tree is, along with Unyielding, the really only 2 trees that are associated with combat as, pure combat trees. While Unyielding is more defensive, Supremacy is pretty much about offense. You're not going to go wrong taking this tree. Even if you're the most pacifist empire in the world, you'll still benefit from this. Early on, taking it early is great because it will give you a plus 20 naval capacity. Sometimes early game, you're not going to get capacity increased techs for a while. Whereas your enemies and neighbors will. This will just help you keep up with them a little bit more, as well as a nice little boost to army damage, which is honestly forgettable. Now, where do you go in this? Because you got 2 separate trees. It's a bit of preference. I take Master Shipwrights first because the 10% cheaper ship build cost will save you tons of alloy. As the game continues, you want to save those alloys as much as possible. This also allows you to build them faster, so if for some reason you lose your fleet, you're not entirely doomed. The next one, usually I take Fleet Logistics as well for the cheaper upkeep, as well as a boost to capacity. Have more ships, they're cheaper to build, they're cheaper to maintain, all good stuff. Down here, Fleet Command Limit, allow you to put more ships in a fleet, as well as the Admiral level cap is great as well. Over here, Overwhelming Force, this is more about buffing your armies and military on the offense, whereas this is a little bit more passive. This one, ship fire rate plus 10% is huge. The bombardment damage is nice. You could arguably take Overwhelming Force before finishing War Games, because War Games is not as strong as a tradition perk here as Overwhelming Force. And then finally down here, great game. This helps you kill star bases easier, meaning your ships will take less. It's almost like attrition damage while taking enemy systems or retaking your old systems. It's a great one. It really weakens star bases when you get this. And then finally at the end, it unlocks the War Doctrine policies. There's 4 of them. They vary depending on what you're doing. Take which ones you want. I'm not going to go into all of them. That would be a separate video. I usually tend to pick the one that gives... If you have nothing else to pick the one that gives increased fire rate within your own borders. It's good. And that would be the top tier Ascension tradition trees and perks. I stuck 3 up there. Let's move on to the next group. Okay, level 2 tradition trees and perks. They've changed this a bit. So We'll start with one that I take on almost every faction just because it's good, and that is the diplomacy tree here. The diplomacy tree, if you're going to be diplomatic with allies, federations, or subjects, you need the diplomacy tree, which would, if you're going for that build, this would be bumped up to the top tier. If not, it's still worth taking it tier 2. It gives you decreased diplomatic influence costs. Making deals costs you less influence. It's good. Diplomatic grants is very good as well. I believe, offhand, I can't remember, but I believe it allows you to get an additional diplomat, which is great. Rather, they call it envoys, but it's basically diplomat. Envoys are hard to come by. You have 2 by default. You want more usually because you use them for both spying and improving or ruining relations and stuff. Having more, even if you're a supremacist empire out to destroy the galaxy, having more of them to spy on your enemies is always good. The next one here, if you want to form a federation, this is the perk you need. Federations need a rework. The reality is they're not as good as subjects, and they have problems with the AI stuff. If you're playing multiplayer, obviously more beneficial. The downside of this is if you can't form an envoy with anybody, all you get is the free... if you can't form a federation with somebody, all you get is an envoy. And the envoy here is worth taking. If you're in a federation, you contribute more to the naval capacity. That's nice, especially if you have a strong federation fleet. I honestly would probably take this last in this tree because you can get it pretty early on, this perk, but it's not the world's greatest perk. You usually have to build up to the Federation naval capacity, and unless you're building there yourself, usually the AIs do it, and they take a while to build up to max. Over here, every embassy you have with a faction gives you 3 unity. It's a great, nice little boost to unity. It doesn't fully cover the cost of going to this tree, nowhere near it, but it's a nice little benefit. Usually, depending on the size of the galaxy and your relations, you could have anywhere between 5 to 10. So it's a nice little boost to unity. Not something you're going to get a lot of early on, but hey, it's a nice little touch. Honestly, it could be replaced with another type thing like automatic. Improved relations goes up more and you wouldn't even notice the difference. Further down here, diplomatic acceptance +5. Honestly, I think it should be +10, but that's me. It just allows you to have a better chance of making deals with people. Usually, the making deals difference is like 100 or more, so it's not huge. But the big thing is, if you improve relations with somebody, you have a chance of acquiring a favor, which you can use to force through either deals with them or get them to vote your way in the Galactic Assembly. Meaning, diplomatic builds, this is great for you. Over here, trust cap +50, trust gross +33. This affects both your subjects, alliances, federation, all of that. Basically, it allows you to have greater trust and greater relations with a faction, and it allows you to build it faster so they stay friends with you longer. It's not like EU4 or any of the other ones where people suddenly turn on you. Stellaris, it's usually a more gradual thing, so this helps with that. And then finally, the bottom of this is you get +10 diplomatic weight. Great for people trying to dominate the Galactic Assembly. If you're going to become like Galactic Emperor or something, this is very important for you. And it gives you another envoy as well, and an Ascension perk. That's definitely one I would put at the top of the tier 2 category. The next one here is a bit subjective. So if you're going diplomacy and you're trying to play politics, you're going to want the politics tree. Otherwise, ignore this piece of advice. Politics gives you another envoy, as well as gives you influence when you assign them to the galactic community. In case you haven't got it already, this tree is all about the galactic community. If the galactic community is weak or doesn't exist, it's useless to you. Thankfully, you can't take this tree until the galactic community has been formed. Anyway, further down here, we have if a resolution you support passes, you gain a favor. This is going to happen a lot unless you're constantly proposing resolutions. You're going to end up with like anywhere from like 10 to 15 offhand favors on various empires. Can be useful. If you stack it with the diplomacy, you could end up with quite a few favors on an empire. Next one down here, when a resolution you proposes passes, gain 18 months worth of unity. why not shave a year and a half off your next tradition or ascension perk? It's great. Downside of this one is you have to constantly be active in the galactic community. You should always have a resolution being proposed. The problem is later game you tend to run low on resolutions to be proposed, but hey, by the time you get there, you should have more unity than you know what to do with anyway. This other half of the tree here, cheaper, reduced influence cost to veto or propose resolutions, and every envoy you assign to the galactic community provides additional diplomatic weight. This basically helps you if you want to be the emperor, the custodian, or on the council. It's great. The big thing is if you stack it with the diplomacy envoys, you can end up with a massive amount of diplomatic weight. You can punch far above your diplomatic weight. It's just great. If you're going to play politics, you need it. Further down here, persistent petitioners. This is an interesting one. If a resolution is passed by another empire, you gain diplomatic weight until one of your own resolutions passes. Now, the actual comedy of this one is it almost directly contradicts your national agenda. If you're constantly passing resolutions, you'll be losing the diplomatic weight periodically, which will make it harder to pass your resolutions. The best way to have tons of diplomatic weight is to not actually pass like one resolution or two, and then just sit back and store up that 25 diplomatic weight, which is huge. That's like equivalent to 10 envoys in the galactic community. And then you can use it to push for something like being empire or abolishing a custodial term or something. But it almost guarantees you, if you're already on the council, that you'll stay there as long as you don't propose stuff. Otherwise, it helps you pass proposals. And the final one here, this is almost solely for council members, custodians, or empires. Veto cooldown goes down, as well as emergency measures. You'll be able to pass or oppose resolutions much easier. And the finishing part of it is a 10 diplomatic weight, an ascension perk, and 4 special resolutions. I'm not going to spoil with them, but they're kind of cool. Okay, on to the next one. So the final one in Tier 2, I would say, is Unyielding. So I've already spoken earlier about how great Supremacy is. Unyielding is the defensive version of it. The reason it's not top tier is later game to mid-game to late game, starbases fall off. This helps keep them more relevant as well as give you security, but it's not going to win you wars. For that, you need Supremacy. So at the start, Unyielding gives you more starbases and upgrade speed. Basically allows you to set up more defenses and build them faster, which is great. If you lose one, this will give you a chance to build one and maybe upgrade it before the enemy keeps going. Basically allows you to adapt to changing borders much easier. If you're fighting a devouring hive, swarm, determined exterminators, etc., this tends to be very useful because the borders shift a lot. So you got 2 separate trees here. Let's go down the short one. Increased hull points, damage for starbases and defense platforms. It's great for your starbases. It makes even your minor starbases do a little bit of damage. It makes your full-on citadels with tons of fleet power that much stronger. Be aware defense platforms are, of course, destroyed when they're destroyed, so it's a little bit less useful, but it does give you an additional boost to keeping them alive and doing more damage until they inevitably die. I like it. It helps. It makes going against somebody who doesn't have this, their starbases are a joke if you've taken Supremacy. Once you get Defensive Zeal, your starbases are that much better. Finally, Fortress Doctrine, cheaper to upgrade starbases. This is great, allows you to get closer to citadels much faster, as well as it makes it harder for people to sabotage your starbase. Oh, and allows you to build more of them, because who doesn't want more giant floating star fortresses? This next one is more about defensive armies and stuff. So you've got defense armies produce unity, which is nice. If you're at war or worried about defending, great. A little bit more unity. Doesn't cover any of the costs in the tree, but it's a nice boost. Defense army health is increased by 25%. This is quite useful. It's going to allow you to withstand bombardment longer, as well as require the enemy to send more armies to take your planets. So it's a delaying one. That also includes the next one, Never Surrender, reduces orbital bombardment damage. These two combined, it's almost like a 50% increase in the time it takes a fleet to take a planet, Unless, obviously, they've got such an overwhelming fleet and army, they just take your planets. But it helps. You can make fortress worlds a lot stronger. Also, and most importantly, even for an empire that's on offense, the war exhaustion gain decrease of 25% is huge. And the hostile claim influence up helps a lot. If enemies are trying to claim your systems, this will prevent, they can claim one out of 4 less systems. And then finally, the peak of this tree, and the reason it makes it into tier 2 on its own, when in defensive war versus another empire, ship build rate is increased by 33%. This is massive. Combine this with supremacy, your ships are built super fast. And if you lose a fleet, you can rebuild it. It helps. Otherwise, you're stuck having to build a fleet a lot slower. Sadly, it only applies to defensive wars. If it applies to offensive wars, this would be a top tier tradition tree. And in addition, ship fire rate is increased by 15% for ships within your borders. If you're not an offensive warmonger, you pretty much need this tradition perk. It makes you that much harder to break. The downside is it makes it a little bit harder for you to go on offense. And if you're fighting like a destroy the galaxy or destroy all their life empires, the problem is it makes it hard for you to attack them. But on the other hand, you'll be able to defend better. And then finally, to end unyielding, you get defense platform cap up 50%. Sadly, not as many people use defense platforms as they should because they get destroyed more often than star bases. But it's a nice little bonus if you have one choke point you need to defend. I recommend make your capital world probably the one with the most starbase defensive platforms. It also reduces the cost of your starbase upkeep and grants access to the Martial Alliance Federation, assuming you have federations enabled with the DLC. Honestly, the only problem with most of the federation perks in the tradition trees is they come at the end when you've either already in a federation or you've got tons of subjects and don't really want to be in a federation. And it gives you an Ascension perk. And that is the end of Tier 2 tradition trees. Okay, Tier 3 Ascension tradition trees. These are kind of borderline ones, depending on your builds and what your role playing and races and stuff. They could either be Tier 2 or they could be Tier 4. There's 4 tiers I created. The first one, and it's a bit of a subjective one. It used to be a lot worse than it is, and that is the Harmony tree. It doesn't give you anything game-changing, but it has some nice little bonuses. So the first part of Harmony here, pop upkeep is reduced by 10%. That's always good. Pop upkeep can kill you in the long run if you're not careful. With massive empires, it's great. If you're going to take this, wait to mid to late game. Early game, it's not going to be the biggest benefit, although it'll save you money as your empire builds up, I guess. Now, obviously, 2 trees here. The one on the right here, crime reduction and governing ethics attraction. Right now, governing ethics really needs some rework adjustments. Hopefully, that's the next area they take a look at. If so, this would become more useful. But the crime -10 is nice. It doesn't prevent crimes if someone's actively sabotaging you, you have low stability or a research shortage. But anything short of that, as long as you have good governor, you'll pretty much not have to build enforcers everywhere. The one below it, +5 stability. Stability boosts are hard to come by. It's just a flat increase in, pop happiness, pop output. Stability is always good. If this was like 10 or anywhere else, it would be much more useful. Sadly, the rest of the tree isn't as good. Next one here, we have leader lifespan +20 years and a leader level cap +1. Stacks really well with the discoveries, leader gain, as well as leader cap as well. Provides a second leader cap bonus, so that's +2 to all your leaders if you do that in discovery. It goes very well on builds that have pops with longer lifespans like enduring. It's really powerful on that. Otherwise, it's just a nice little boost. It even affects hive minds and machine empires with your rulers. Cap goes up by 1. Next one here, pop demotion time -75%, as well as empire size from pop. The demotion time is nice because if a pop all of a sudden can't do their job, either you deleted the building, changed the building, or they've been, resettled to another planet, this will make them adapt faster so they're less unhappy for longer. It's kind of nice. The big one here, empire size from pop reduction, is quite nice. The problem is it's still not going to prevent you from going over your empire size cap massively because of population, but 10% is nice. And then down here, edicts fund plus 50. I think it should be edicts fund plus 100, but hey, that's me. It allows you to take another edict so long as it's not a top tier edict. So another mid to low tier edict. It's nice. If you get it early game, can make a big boost. By the time you get this, usually, because you've got better tradition trees to take, it's not going to be as useful. And finally, at the end, every planet that you ascend gains a bonus of 25% to the effect. If you're going to play a small, highly ascended, advanced empire, is great. This is almost a pure spiritualist tree. You get the biggest benefits, and that is more emphasized by the fact you can form the Holy Covenant Federation, which you and other spiritualist empires can get even more unity and bonuses. Hilariously, even machine empires can join Holy Covenant, even though they cannot be the leader. This was added in the new recent patch. And it gives you an Ascension perk. All these give Ascension perk. I don't even know why I'm mentioning it. Anyway, now the next one here is Prosperity. This one I debated quite a lot. It could have either been tier 2 or it could have even been tier 4. That's why I created the tier 3, is kind of in between. This is all about boosting your economy. The downside is they're not game-changing bonuses until you have a large empire. Small empires will see a benefit, but not as large. The first one, mining station output plus 20. The reason this is not so amazing is if you're struggling with minerals, you clearly haven't been building right, or you're super late game and you're turning them all into alloys. It's a nice boost to mineral output though. So we've got two separate trees. Let's do the small one first. First one, buildings and districts are cheaper to build and build faster. Honestly, if you're having trouble building districts and buildings, you've got other problems that this is not going to solve. It's not so game breaking. If you could get this early game, like in, I don't know, one of the top tier like expansion, this would be way more useful. But having to go into a separate tree to get it, it's not game breaking. It's nice. You build them faster. They're cheaper. Saves you some resources. But reality, it's not like you have to rebuild buildings. You build them once and move on. Next one here, Public Works Division. City districts give you extra housing. If you've got a ring world or a one city planet city, you get additional housing as well. Great. The reality is you probably aren't going to run out of housing that often, assuming you're building, but it does allow you on massive one planet city worlds to get rid of one housing district and add a different district, which is kind of nice. Over here, building and district upkeep reduced by 10%. If you're huge, large empire, this will save you money. Probably won't save you from economic trouble though. Down here, specialist pop research output plus 5. This is the only, well, it's not the only. It's one of the two reasons that this makes it into a higher tier than 4. Resource output bonuses are hard to come by. Specialist ones, even more. This will increase alloys, research, all that great stuff. It's pretty strong. That's why it's worth getting eventually, just probably not one of your first tradition trees. And then over here, upkeep from jobs reduced as well. Applies to all the jobs, can save you special resources, food, minerals, all this energy. It's a huge discount to your entire empire. Obviously more beneficial in larger empires, but affects everything. And finally, at the end, resources from jobs plus 5%. This is the other reason it makes it into a good tier. Resources from job bonuses are hard to come by. 5% is basically 5% increased productivity for most of your empire. It's really useful. It's really good. Also gives you an Ascension perk. All told, it's a tree to take if you want more bonuses, but it's not going to solve your economic problems on its own, if that makes sense. You can't solve an economic problem with this tree, but you can get a bigger benefit if you've built your economy properly. Okay. The next one, subterfuge. This is one that becomes much more useful in multiplayer, in my experience. The AIs are not particularly great at spying at the moment. Hopefully that changes. It's all about spying. So at the first part, you code break better, meaning you can conduct operations against other empires more efficiently. The next one here, and it's kind of an interesting because it's not two separate trees. It's one of the new designs. You get another code breaking, as well as your operation skills go up by 2, meaning you can conduct better operations more efficiently with less issue. It also provides a nice little tracking boost to your ships, which is quite nice. It allows them to hit more accurately. It's kind of cool. Over here, we've got encryption +1, makes it harder for people to spy on you. And it increases your chance to evade, meaning combined with the tracking, your ships are going to hit more often and be harder to hit. Pretty useful on swarm type ships and stuff. So like corvettes and stuff, where you'll have a lot of them. A chance to evade on a small ship going up. Really good. Next one, enemies conducting operations in you. They're harder and they take more infiltration. It's great. The only downside here is once someone gets a lot of infiltration on you, they tend not to lose it unless for some reason they lose the envoy with you. So it's kind of good. If you're fighting someone else with spies, you need this tree. Otherwise, you can honestly neglect it and not really feel the pain. Double agents, you get another envoy, which is always good. I'm a fan of more envoys. If someone spies on you and fails, you get 10 intel. Honestly, almost forgettable. The maximum infiltration level +10, on the other hand, is more beneficial. Means you have to conduct less operations to get more spying on them. And then over here, shadow recruits, you infiltrate nations 50% faster. It's good, especially if you've conducted an operation and while your max is still high, your actual level is low. It allows you to build back up faster. And then if you conduct an operation and it's successful, you refund 50% of the infiltration level cost, meaning you can conduct more spying operations. If you're playing as weird Shadowmancer type character that rules the galaxy because everyone's your puppet from the shadows, you need this tree. If you're playing multiplayer, it's worth taking just so other people don't keep sabotaging you with operations. But if you're playing just against AIs, it's probably a tier 4 tree. And then the next one, and this is definitely one that I might even pick over some of these others in this category. Could bump it up to 2, depending on if you're using slaves or not, and that is the domination tree. The first one is kind of pathetic. Cheaper clear blockers. Blockers don't come back. They're a one-time cost. I tend to not have trouble paying for them, in my experience, but it does help you organize worlds better. The reality is all these trees have to have a decent starting level because you could take them at any point. This is one that kind of suffers for that. Its start is not as good as some of the others, but early game it might help you a little bit. Next one, it's an old design, so we have 2 separate trees. On the right here, Enforcers give 1 unity, also unlocks the Enhanced Surveillance Edict. If you're struggling with crime and stuff, first off, you probably have other problems, but your Enforcers, which you want Enforcers on every massive world eventually, +1 unity is a nice little benefit. It's not going to solve the cost you're putting into the tree, so don't take it to generate unity. Just take it because you have to complete it. The one below it, on the other hand, is a good one. You have extended shifts, which is an edict that you can pass, gives you more output and stuff. I believe at the cost of happiness. But it also provides worker and slave pop resource output, up by 5%. This is really good. If you're running a authoritarian empire and you have lots of slaves, 5% increase is great, especially because slaves are usually working food, minerals, or energy. 5% more of those resources is really good. It allows you to support more specialists. It's great, especially for slaves, because you can really get a lot of output from the slaves. If you're not running a slaving empire or authoritarian or trying to maximize your output from your pops, less useful, still good on any empire is the reality. Over here, more housing from your capital buildings and housing buildings. I really wonder why this is even here. It feels like it should be more in the prosperity tree or vice versa. Plus the housing. Okay, it saves you one housing district. Okay, I think it should be changed. Over here, though, however, we get a decent one. Governor level cap up 2. This will improve your governors to give more resources, reduce crime, etc. And it gives you some influence. If you're struggling with influence, usually you've got too many alliances and pacts with other people, or you don't have enough rivalries. This helps a little bit, but it's not game-changing. Should be more like 1 in my opinion. Down below, ruler level up by 2, edicts fund up by 50. It's kind of hilarious that this is a single thing, considering Harmony had an entire tradition perk itself that just gave you 50. This gives you 50 and 2 ruler level caps. It goes really well if you're stacking it with Harmony and Discovery, because it will give a +4 to your ruler level cap and a +4 to your governors. I think something close to that. Anyway, it improves your leaders better. If you're maximizing leader levels already, you might exceed the cap with this. Otherwise, just be aware that you don't need to go above like 6 in your builds, because you'll get it from these trees. And then to end, empire size from pop reduced by 10, similar to Harmony here, which has just a general 10 decrease. Honestly, Domination, Harmony, they should either cancel the other one out or they both need a buff, because right now neither feels amazingly different than the other. This one, on the other hand, does give you the hegemony federation type, which is kind of cool. It's a federation focused really on you and any subjects. The difficulty is getting people into federations now, especially keeping them. Not many people want to join a hegemony federation, but it can be pretty useful if you get into it. Whoever's the hegemon, the leader of it, gets a lot of bonuses. Everyone else doesn't get much. But if you're the hegemon, it's good for you. And that is it for Tier 3. On to Tier 4. The 2 in Tier 4. Now, here's the worst tier. Now, be aware that depending on your build or how you like to play the game, all these tiers change. This is just what I find to be the less beneficial ones. And there's only 2 in this. We've got Mercantile and Adaptability. So let's go over Mercantile first. Adds 5 trade protection and a collection range. This is good if you're getting a lot of trade value from systems or you're having trouble with pirates. The reality is, if you build enough star bases, which you should be able to support with unyielding, which you should take eventually, it's not the biggest problem. Is nice otherwise, though. Empires that make lots of money from trade will benefit from this. Other empires, not as much. Now, old design, so we got 2. Over here, we got clerks provide an additional trade value. It's great. The downside here is that clerks are probably one of the worst jobs in the game still. So ideally you don't want tons of clerks. You want other people, and clerks are just the fill-in extra job that people take when they have no other jobs. City districts give one as well. Trade districts, ring world segments, residential archaeologies give an additional clerk or 2 job. It's great. Clerks aren't that great though. They provide energy, or they provide trade value and stuff. It's not game breaking. Further on down here, commercial zones provide a merchant job. This is much better. If they replace trickle up economics with merchant jobs, this whole tree would be that much better. Commercial segments, habitat trade districts provide another merchant job as well. The downside here is it's basically making the district provide one more job, which doesn't entirely make the district that much better. Now, the other one, on the other hand, is a little bit better. This one gives you the ability to shift between consumer benefits and marketplace of ideas, which, as it says, you can trade your trade value to consumer goods or Unity. The reality is I don't tend to do it. If anything, I usually want the militarized economy to gain the bonus to alloys. But if you want to get Unity or not have to build as many consumer goods production districts and stuff, it's great. Otherwise, not as much. Further down here, trade value plus 10%. What more do I have to say? If you've already got a trading empire, it's a great boost. If you don't, meh. It stacks more with the clerks and stuff, but as I said, clerks shouldn't be the basis of your whole economy if you can avoid it. Next one over here, market fee, negative 10%. This is great, especially if you're playing as like a trade, whatchamacallit. If you're playing as a megacorp, there we go. Took me a moment to remember. And you're going to be doing a lot of buying resources on the market because you have excessive amounts of energy or other resources. This is great. 10% is huge. If you manage to become the Galactic Marketplace controller, your market fee is minuscule compared to everyone else's. The downside is you're still at the whims of the market. On its own, this is a great one. The rest of the tree kind of lets it down, though. And to end, you gain another 10% trade value. So all told, 20%. It's kind of weird that the finisher is the same as one of its perks within the tree. And it allows you access to the Trade League Federation type. I have yet to get someone to join a trade league. I've tried several times. The AIs are just not interested in joining federations and trade leagues, or hegemonies for that matter. Not much at all. Can be very beneficial if you manage to get some people into it. Especially if you get megacorps, you'll make tons of money. They'll make tons of money. Makes this tree that much better. Unfortunately, it's subjective to having good relations and people that are willing to join a trade league and trade with you, as well as relying on merchants. If you can do that, this is not a tier 4 one. In my experience, you don't tend to get that a lot of the time. Again, in multiplayer in particular, either you're going to have 1 or 2 allies while the rest of the players are against you. It's not as good there either because you don't have a ton of trading partners and type stuff. But if you do form it, you'll make lots of money out of it. And the final one, and arguably one of the worst of all of them, is adaptability. Start off, pop housing usage minus 10%. It's not amazing. There's other techs and resources and trees that do similar effects. If you're having pop problems, just build residential districts. It's usually like you only need like 4 on a planet at the end of the game anyway. So it's not so great. Now, again, old design, so we split to 2. These have been changed since before the Orion patch. I suspect they'll change again, so be aware all numbers are subjective. Enhanced recycling. Building and district cost and upkeep reduced by 10%. Similar to the one in the prosperity tree. It's kind of cool. The upkeep cost reduction is nice. This reduces the keep cost of your special resources, which is great because there's very few reductions for them. Your resources will go that much further. Basically, you'll get another building every 10 buildings you build. Further down here, this is a defensive one. Orbital bombardment damage minus 25%. Defense army damage plus 25%. Stacks very good with the unyielding bonuses because they're basically the same bonus. Your army would have 50% more health, 50 less likely to orbital bombardment. It makes your worlds a pain to take. The downside is if the enemy is bombarding your worlds, they've usually already won the war or are winning the war. At best, you're going to delay them because eventually they will just bombard your armies into dust and then invade with a small army. But in the meantime, you'll have more time to rally a fleet to come to the aid of your planet. Or your allies will. It can be quite useful. All told, if you're fighting crises that pop up around your galaxy and invade from multiple directions, this can be very useful. The downside of crisis is they tend to destroy your systems. Anyway, it's decent. It's not game-breaking. Over here, plus 10% habitability is good. The downside is it's very rarely going to make you be able to settle another planet that you couldn't settle already. You're usually better off getting another species in your empire and settling with them rather than trying to either genetically modify or gain habitability techs to settle another planet. At best, it gets your habitability that much higher so it costs less resources to maintain that population. It's useful. If it was higher, it would be a much better perk. Down here, plus 1 building slots on all your planets. Does not increase the max building slots on your planets, which is unfortunately a downside. It's very easy to max out your planets. You'll get like 4 from tech, 3 or 4 from tech, and this would give you 5. You can only have so many on a planet. By and large, you'll exceed your planet building slots by the end game, regardless of what you do, because you get them from building housing buildings, which you have to build, housing districts, which you have to build anyway. Not so great. Over here, cheaper resettlement cost. If you're resettling your pops, so you're playing like an authoritarian or hive mind where you can resettle quickly, cheaply, and efficiently, this is much more useful. The reality is you can also do automatic resettlement, which doesn't include this cost. Plus, the cost to resettle is not game breaking. I think it's like 100 energy or something. It helps with resettling, but it's not going to change things. Besides, resettling manually can be a bit of a pain unless you've got a small empire or you're really, really min-maxing things. If you're min-maxing, great. Otherwise, not so much. And the final one, planetary prospecting decisions. It unlocks an additional resource deposit once on your planets if you take the decision. Costs resources to get the decision. Very rarely will you get anything that will make your planets that much better, but it does make your small planets a little bit better and your big planets a little bit better as well. Basically, you don't have as many trash planets, but it doesn't make a planet that is trash amazing. And that is it for a normal organic empire's traditions. Now, let's talk about machine and hive minds because they have different tradition trees. Actually, before I do that, let's make one more quick note here about the Ascension trees, and I'll talk about these later, but a normal empire has access to all 4, barring origins and stuff that change that. Okay, here we are with a hive mind. You'll notice, first off, that there is not as many tradition trees or even Ascension trees. That is because a hive mind has 1 less normal tree as well as it has 2 locked Ascension trees. It cannot do psionics, it cannot do full robotics, it can do cybernetics and genetics though. And the tree it loses up above, it loses access to the mercantile tradition tree. Basically, since you don't have trade in a hive mind, there's no point in giving you access to that tree because it's all about trade. Therefore, things change slightly. Not immensely, though, because Mercantile was, in my opinion, a tier 4 tradition tree. Everything else kind of stays the same. There is some slight changes that are worth noting, though. Some of the changes are as simple as under the domination tree, you don't have crime as a hive mind. Instead, you have deviancy. Great. It helps with that. You also have this tree over here, which is basically the harmony tree, but is replaced. It becomes the synchronicity tree. It's almost identically the same with the difference of you don't have, I believe it's a leader cap there. As well as your synapse drones give you amenities rather than demotion or promotion stuff. It does not improve the synchronicity tree at all, in my opinion. It's pretty much a replacement, slightly better, but it's still not worth taking synchronicity, harmony, unless you're going for specific stuff or role-playing an empire. On the other hand, I will also make a note that stuff like, expansion tree, pop growth stuff on hive minds is very powerful since they already have pop growth bonuses. This allows them to build and expand that much faster, which they're supposed to do anyway, so it helps with that. Everything else, though, is basically the same. You can go through it all and look it over. It's just a lot of renaming conventions and stuff. It does change the exact Ascension perks you can take, but we're not covering all of that stuff. The other thing to note is you have access to the genetics tree, which we'll go over later, as well as the cybernetics tree, which is a change from pre 3.6 Orion. It's kind of cool. You can build a half robotic, half organic hive mind, which is kind of cool. On to the machine empires. Okay, here we are with the machine empire. So this is just a default machines. They're not a servitor, a assimilator, or an exterminator. This is just the default ones, basically. So you are still lacking the mercantile tree as well. You'll notice you have a grand total of 12, including 1 ascension tree. That's because as a machine empire, you're locked into the synthetic ascension pack. That's just how it is. You can't do cyborgs, you can't do gene modding, you definitely cannot do psionics. So everything is basically the same for these guys. However, there are a few changes and stuff that you want to note because they're pretty impressive. The big one here is synchronicity. For a machine empire, this goes from tier 3, where I put the harmony, because it's basically a harmony replacement, to tier 2 solely because machine leaders are 50% less likely to suffer breakdowns and accidents. Machine leaders don't die unless they're killed in combat or their survey ships are destroyed. This means for machine empires, your leaders are super precious. Having breakdowns where they get corrupted, die, or gain negative traits is a pain because it takes you a while to get a new one unless you're obviously building leader XP gain. So it's just a huge bonus to have 50% less of them. The amount of times I've had a high level leader go crazy is annoying. You also get this nice one here where your evaluators reduce deviancy. It's kind of like your enforcers, but you also have automatic resettlement chance up. For machine empires, you can get your automatic resettlement rather high, so you don't have to micro move your robotic pops between worlds. You just build like star bases with travel networks and stuff, and you can send them everywhere. It's really quite cool. Could be a little bit better. You have some other changes throughout the stuff as well, but that's the big one. If you are not a exterminator, you do have access to the politics tree, which is quite nice as well. You have access to almost everything else. Be aware that you don't have organic pops, so stuff like pop growth has now become mechanical pop assembly speed. It's still good. Most every single tier has stayed the same. The biggest change is the synchronicity. Harmony tree is that much better. Everything else is almost the same. It's just renamed. That's kind of what it is. Versatility, on the other hand, is the replacement for adaptability. It might sneak from tier 4 to tier 3, depending on just how you're playing the game. But the reality is it's not amazing. So cheaper pop assembly. For mechanical pops, it costs resources to build them, unlike organics, where I guess you could say it takes food, but not directly. It can be a cost early on, or when you've got a large empire, that can really slow down your economy. So cheaper assembly is nice. You also have trust cap with only synthetics. This is replacing the diplomacy tree. Not completely. It's similar to the diplomacy tree in that it gives you envoys and stuff. It's kind of like a weird amalgamation because you get cheaper. You get another envoy. You get trust cap against other robots. You also get cheaper market fee, which is kind of interesting. It's technically replacing adaptability, but it kind of feels like it should be something in like the kind of like they took it from mercantile and stuck it into this tree. A little weird. Over here, cheaper pop. Whatever. Upkeep from jobs is nice, and the resettlement cost cool, but you can gain similar benefits from the other trees, and arguably they're still better. Could be tier 3. I'd still say tier 4. Anyhow, there's that. On to talking about the Ascension trees. Okay, we're back to a just normal organic population empire. So if you haven't played since the Orion 3.6 patch or played the beta, which was kind of cool, you will now see 4 new tradition trees. I'm calling them the Ascension trees because that's pretty much what they are. They're kind of a weird makeup of old Ascension perks and technologies and new stuff to make 4 distinct late game paths. They do vary depending on your empire. Hive minds can't do the robotics or psionics, but they can do genetics and cybernetics. Organic pops have access to all of them. Machine empires only have access to synthetics. Driven assimilators have some cybernetics. It varies on your origin and empire, but suffice to say, if you want to be able to go all 4, you have to do your pretty normal organic empire. there is the psionic origin for organic empires, which does lock you into the psionic ascension tree. Just be aware. I think there's another one as well, but I don't remember offhand. So the way getting into these trees works, because you'll notice that you can't just go straight into them, you have to go and pick an ascension perk, and these have changed a bit. So like over here, we have the flesh is weak. You have to have another ascension perk, and you have to have the integrated cybernetics technology. Then you can adopt this, and it will unlock the cybernetics tree as well as give you a tech. It's a similar thing. This requires gene tailoring, unlocks the genetics, synthetics, cybernetics, and then over here, psionics. Once you unlock them, of course, then you have to start the new tree. But once you're locked into one, you're locked into one. So don't expect to be able to mix and match these as well. You can't have cybernetics, psionics, etc., etc. Sometimes there's weird cases where you can turn telepaths into machines, but they lose their psionic abilities. Stuff like that does occur. They've done a good job limiting you to one tree. So this is where really the role playing comes in to Stellaris. So I'm not necessarily going to say one tree is worlds better than the other. It really depends on what you want to play for, and you should be working towards it for most of the game. So some of the benefits, even if in the tree they don't seem powerful, you may have built your empire in such a way that it's a lot stronger than it would be if you didn't build your empire for for a specific ascension tree. So we'll start from the first one here, the psionics one. The reason I'm doing this first is because it has some other unique mechanics associated with it, and it also seems weaker than it actually is. So at the beginning, you get the latent psionic trait, which has some benefits to research, output, and other stuff. Later on, you can improve that trait, which will give all your pops with that a large benefit. It affects everything from your rulers to your governors to your generals to your admirals. It makes it a lot stronger. The benefits are not shown here in the tree. You will have to play it to see them all yourself. So first one, you get latent psionic. The next one, you get Psycorps, which is a building that basically, I believe it applies, it's not, I don't think it applies stability. It might apply stability or else reduce crime on your worlds, but it basically allows you to build psionic armies, which are very powerful. They do a lot of morale damage. They're quite nice. For a non-specialized empire, they're one of the better units you're going to get. It also gives you a research option, thought enforcement, which I believe unlocks an edict that kind of reduces crime and stuff in your worlds at the cost of a large edict amount. Next one, base intel on all faction goes up. This is kind of nice because it gives you a little bit more information on them. It's not going to give you access to all their high-level information, but it makes infiltrating them easier. Hilariously, psionics goes very well with subterfuge. I wonder if that's why they're both purple. But it stacks very nicely with that. It also gives you sight beyond sight Empire Edict, which is kind of cool as well. Next one, you unlock your psychic potential or psionic potential. It's basically psychic. This was what gives you the large bonus. It also allows you to assimilate other species. So you're no longer limited to just like your main species having psychic powers. Now you can make all your species have psionic powers. It's kind of cool. Down here, we've got Breach the Shroud. So this is what unlocks Breaching the Shroud. Prior to this, you just took the Ascension perk and you could do it. Shroud's like an extra dimensional space that's in the mind. In it, you can make deals with various entities. Now this changes so that when you go in there, you'll make contact with a psionic like entity immediately. You can either go with them, they'll demand or affect your empire in different ways, or you can refuse them and try and get a relationship with a psionic entity that you like. It's, from what I can read from all their description stuff, the chance of getting different entities changes on your ethics and how your empire is made up. Some of them are good, some of them can be bad and painful, and they can make weird changes to your empire, but it's cool because you can get stuff like psionic avatars, which is a very powerful ship unit. You can gain bonuses to fire speed, tracking speed. You can also gain negatives. It's a little bit more rolling the dice than the other Ascension trees. This makes it better to breach the shroud, and telepaths now provide additional resources from your psionic population. So again, it's an output bonus that you'll see elsewhere. Code breaking encryption up. As I said, subterfuge goes pretty well with psionics. And to the end, all your edicts are cheaper to maintain, and it's faster for you to delve into the shroud again. Be aware, delving in the shroud costs resources. So you have to have a decent economy to do it anyway. It's not a huge cost. So let's go to the right. Let's do synthetics. So synthetics are if you want to be robots, basically. If you're already a robot, it's tweaked slightly to give some more benefits, but this is translating organics into robots. So at the beginning here, leader experience, leader cap. If you're going for a leader cap build, it's great. For machines, it's nice to have more leader cap in general. Next one, we've got robotic pop amenity usage goes down, meaning it's easier for your robots to be, they cost less to maintain. The amenities is kind of interesting because I tend not to have trouble with that with them. Over here, robot output plus 10. It's kind of cool. It's just robots are more productive. You can also not necessarily be your population being robots. You can just have servant robots, in which case this tree will also affect them as well. Over here, to modify species is cheaper. It's great because as machines and robots, you tend to mod your species a lot more than anyone else outside of geneticists. It's quite cool. And then finally, robot modification points plus 2. This is huge. It's hard to get species or modification or robotic modification points. So getting 2 is quite nice. And then at the end, your roboticist jobs, you get another one as well as another mechanical species trait picking. Be aware that there is still, let's see, where is it? There are still benefits to just starting the trees because you get the technologies unlocked. The technologies have strong benefits as well, so don't just look at the tree and say, oh, this tree only provides this much. The techs are also quite useful as well, and there's other stuff as well. Hidden behind it, events and other changes that are not obvious on the surface. They're meant to be a surprise, so I'm not going to go into all of them. Now we have, let's do cybernetics. We'll do genetics last since this is the most confusing. So cybernetics are people who want to build cyborgs. You want half organic, half robotic. If you want to play cyborg, honestly, go play as a driven assimilator first so you can kind of get the feeling of how they play. Both organic assembly as well as robotic assembly is a thing with these guys. They're usually better than both machines and organics combined, but they cost food unlike machines, and they also, I believe, cost minerals instead of organics just costing food. So it's kind of a weird hybrid. At the beginning, you can unlock a project which grants all your species cybernetic traits, which are good bonuses. Next one allows changes your species rate, allowing any other population that wanders into your land to be converted into cyborgs, which is kind of cool. Over here, cyborgs are cheaper to upkeep, always a good thing. Further down here, this allows you to produce new cyborg pops via pop organic assembly, which is kind of cool. They just straight into cyborgs. No organics, no robots, cyborgs. It's quite nice. It is a policy though, so be aware you have to change it after you unlock it. Next one allows certain cyborg traits that can be applied. Requires gene tailoring to be researched, which is ironically when you need to unlock genetics. So be aware you need another tech as well. Cyborg traits are pretty powerful, so by all means enjoy having them. And finally down here, any robotic modification points you get apply to organic species as well. And it's cheaper to change them. This is nice because the odds are you're going to get more. You're going to get some robotic modification points as well as organic ones. So cyborgs, you get more modifications than either side on its own. And then finally at the end here, resources from cyborg pops up by 10%, as well as an organic species trait pick. This is nice. more output from cyborgs is amazing. Honestly, I think I haven't run all the tests and everything. I think cyborgs are probably the most productive and might be the strongest of the Ascension trees, but that's just on the surface, not including all the weird stuff like psionic avatars and changing costs and stuff. And then the final tree here is genetics. So genetics gets weird, and I'm not going to go into how to modify your species. You probably either know that or you should go learn that, or it's a topic for another video. But basically, this allows you to mod your species to an even larger degree. Get rid of negative traits, add beneficial ones. So to start, it unlocks clone vats. Clone vats you will get them if you start with the clone army origin. Basically, you clone your population, they grow quite quickly. It also unlocks some more gene modification points. That's quite cool because you want to mod your species. I recommend getting rid of negative traits, or at least any bad negative traits. There's some minor negative traits, and adding good ones. The next one below this, clone vats produce an additional organic pop assembly. Once you get stem cell simulation, your pop should grow faster pretty much than anyone else. If you're a hive mind and you've gotten stuff like new life already, your pops grow at a honestly ridiculous rate. You'll probably end up with too many populations on your worlds, so make sure you're ready to either resettle or have automatic resettling going, because it's very easy to max out your worlds in the test runs I did. Further down, cheaper to mod your species. You notice there's a trait for synthetic, cybernetics, and the others modifications. Be aware psionics can in fact mod their population too, just never to the level genetic Ascension empires do as well. Next one, you can remove beneficial traits and add detrimental traits. This is kind of a weird one. You could use it to limit certain populations' growth or other stuff, or change them and then, I guess, send them into other empires. I'm not entirely sure why you would want to do all this stuff, but it's kind of cool that it allows complete gene modding. It also might depend on what species traits are considered positive versus detrimental, and I don't know that offhand. Next one allows advanced traits for species modifications. The advanced traits are similar to the cyborg ones. They can be quite powerful used properly. I'm not going to go into them here. Enjoy finding out. It also allows you to gene mod twice more, and if you're a hive mind, and this is very important for hive mind empires, it allows you to assimilate pops in or out of hive minds. So the biggest downside of a hive mind is your species has to do everything. No longer. Once you get engineered genesis, you can take over a world and assimilate those pops. So if they have a particularly optimized build, multiplayer in particular, you can gain the benefits of a massively modified species without having to gene mod it yourself. Doesn't work on robots, unfortunately. Probably works on cyborgs, but I haven't tested a very edge case. Probably not, actually, though, now I think about it. But who knows? And then at the end here, you can alter population appearances with species modification. Honestly, this is more of a cosmetic thing than a game-changing thing, in my opinion, but it also gives you another trait pick as well, meaning you can add another whole trait to your species. And then at the end, it allows research of rare transgenesis technologies. These can be very powerful stuff associated with gene modding, growth, etc. And it also allows you to modify twice more. Sorry, not twice more. It gives you 2 more points for modification. I should say it that way. All told, it really depends on role-playing. In my experience, and it varies, robots tend to be the strongest populations by default. Therefore, their tree is a little bit weaker than some of the others. Psionics are almost like rolling the dice, gambling on what you get with the Shroud, but it's just a generic boost to all your population that gets psionic traits. It's quite strong in its own right. More productivity, less specialization outside of the Shroud. And genetics, you really have to be into gene modding. You have to constantly be modding your species. The downside of that is you sometimes fall behind on society research. Cybernetics are kind of a hybrid. has benefits, has downsides, is kind of a little bit weird, but some of their traits can be very, very strong. You get some of the benefits of robots while losing some of the weaknesses of the organics and vice versa. I haven't tested how some of the endgame scenarios affect cybernetics, not being a big cybernetic player myself, but can be very strong. The cyborgs were one of the strongest ways to play the game before. So I imagine it might be pretty powerful if you do it with something like necrophages. I haven't tested what the necrophages allow. They've been changing it through the beta. But necrophages stuff could be very powerful on some of these. And that's pretty much it. I'm not going to talk about Ascension, the perks and other stuff. It's all about traditions and tradition trees. If you're interested in a video on Ascension perks and stuff, let me know. I might be able to do that later. But that will be the end of this video. Hopefully it's helped you, especially with all the changes coming in the 3.6 Orion patch. If you've enjoyed it, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Tell me what your tier list is. This is just mine. I could be wrong. In my experience, though, you'll never go wrong with expansion, discovery, or supremacy. So, what can I say? Thanks for watching. Bye for now.